The moment the county surveyor stopped walking, I knew something was wrong. He froze at the edge of my yard, checked his tablet, then looked up at me with an expression people usually reserve for car crashes and bad news. My neighbor Valerie Granger stood beside him wearing her usual "I'm about to win" smile. She'd spent weeks accusing me of stealing her land, marking my yard with flags, filing complaints, threatening lawsuits. But then the surveyor cleared his throat and said the words that stopped the whole street. "Mr. Cole, her house is built on your property." Valerie's jaw dropped. And what she did next is the reason this entire story blew up. I never planned on starting a war over a patch of dirt. When I moved to Pine Ridge Lane, I was looking for peace, real, soul-quieting peace. The kind you only find in old houses with uneven floors and porches that creak like they're greeting you. My Uncle Ray left me the place in his will, a 1,940 craftsman tucked against a small wooded rise in northern Colorado. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like something that had been waiting for me. When I first turned down that gravel driveway, pine needles crunching under my tires, I knew I wasn't going back to Denver. The air felt cleaner, the mornings sharper, and the house, well, it had personality. Ivy crawled across the fence line like it owned the place. The shutters were a faded forest green, sun-beaten, chipped, and perfect. Inside, the floors groaned, the windows stuck, and the whole place smelled like cedar and a lifetime of stories. I didn't mind the quirks. I needed the reset. For the first 2 months, life was simple. I patched the roof, repainted the shutters, replaced a few stubborn boards on the porch, and fixed up the swing Uncle Ray had hung back in the 80 seconds. Neighbors waved politely but didn't linger. Pine Ridge Lane was a quiet street just outside the boundary of Maple Ridge Estates, the infamous HOA that loved rules more than oxygen. I figured being outside their reach meant I'd never cross paths with them. I was wrong. I just didn't know it yet. Then came the day Valerie Granger moved in. Her house, if you could even call it that, was a modern cube of glass and metal that looked like it had been airdropped from a Silicon Valley catalog. I watched her yell instructions at 2 poor movers who were wrestling with a marble-top table that probably cost more than my truck. She had platinum hair heels on moving day and the kind of clipped voice that made every sentence sound like an accusation. That evening, she marched right up my porch steps, without even slowing down. No wave, no neighborly smile, just a clipboard and a mission. "You must be the new owner," she said, offering a handshake she didn't actually look interested in completing. "Valerie Granger. I just purchased the home next door." "Ethan Cole," I replied, wiping sawdust off my hands. "Welcome to the neighborhood." She scanned my porch like she was appraising a property she regretted being close to. Her eyes lingered on the fence line, the irregular slope behind my house, the ancient oak tree that leaned toward the hill. "You've got quite the unusual lot," she said. "Looks like a pre-zoning irregularity." "Yeah," I nodded. "My uncle built most of this before the county updated the maps." She tapped something on her clipboard. "Have you had the boundaries verified recently?" That was the first red flag. Boundary questions are not normal neighbor introduction topics. Unless, of course, the neighbor is planning something. "I have the survey from my uncle," I said. "Nothing's changed." She smiled a little too wide. "Oh, I'm sure it's fine. I just noticed your fence seems close to what might be my easement. I'll double-check my deed. Most people say nice to meet you and walk away." Valerie walked away looking like she had already drafted a complaint email. Still, I hoped that was the end of it. Then the flags started showing up. Brightly colored plastic markers tied around my oak tree, another near my shed, one practically glowing in the middle of my vegetable patch. I hadn't placed them, and only one person had been examining my fence line like it was a crime scene. The next time I saw her, she was standing at her property edge, wearing oversized sunglasses like she was trying to intimidate the Sunday. "I looked over my records," she called out. "You may be encroaching." That was how it started, not with screaming or lawsuits, just a smile, a clipboard, and a claim she had no right to make. But I didn't know then that the flags weren't the beginning. They were the warning shot. If the flags were the warning shot, then the envelope was the opening salvo. 2 days after Valerie's encroachment comment, I found a manila folder stuffed inside my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name scribbled in confident realtor-style handwriting. Inside was a printed satellite photo of my property, grainy, outdated, obviously pulled from a free site, and a thick red line slashed diagonally across it. According to her drawing, my fence, part of my garden, and half my shed were suddenly on her side. At the bottom in cursive, she'd added "pending survey. Potential encroachment. Will verify shortly." I half expected lipstick on the signature. I scanned it, saved it, and immediately called Monica Ruiz, my real estate attorney from my Denver days. Monica had the tone of someone who spent her adult life dismantling bad contracts and worse people. Let me guess, she said after I explained everything. New neighbor, real estate background, overconfident, boundary obsessed. That about sums it up. She's bluffing, Monica said. But bluffs can cause real damage. Get your own survey. Someone reputable. I'll send you names. Enter Tanya Blake. Tanya pulled into my driveway the next afternoon in a pickup full of tripods and GPS equipment. She wore steel-toed boots, aviators, and the expression of someone who had absolutely no patience for suburban theatrics. We walked the perimeter together while she scribbled notes on a tablet. You said your neighbor is having her own survey done, she asked. Wednesday, I said. Guy named Scott Delaney. Tanya stopped walking. Scott Delaney, she repeated. That's interesting. In a good way or a bad way. In a way that makes me check the batteries on all my equipment twice. She explained carefully that Delaney had a reputation. Not illegal, not provable, but shady enough that most reputable firms wouldn't touch him. Some clients hire surveyors who deliver the results they want, she said. Not the truth. That sat wrong in my stomach. And the next morning, it sat even worse, when a drone hovered above my backyard, buzzing just high enough to pretend it wasn't spying. It hovered, tilted its camera, flew off toward Valerie's house like a guilty pigeon. By Tuesday, she escalated again. She planted a laminated sign facing my yard. Survey in progress, do not disturb boundary markers. Then she added more flags. Orange ones near the shed. Yellow ones by the slope. A pink one stabbed right into the soil beside my tomato plants. That one felt like a personal attack. Wednesday morning arrived with surgical precision. Scott Delaney, the shady surveyor, pulled up in a white truck with magnetic decals that looked recently printed. He wore mirrored sunglasses and a smirk that told me he'd already decided whose side he was on. Just giving you a courtesy notice, he said. We'll be accessing the shared boundary. Stay on her property, I replied. He smirked again, which told me everything. 10 minutes later, Tanya rolled up. She greeted Scott like someone greeting an ex-coworker who once stole her stapler. Still doing boundary work, huh? She said. Scott's jaw tightened. Go where the money is. Tanya winked at me behind his back. Let's make sure the money doesn't affect the math. The surveying circus went on for hours. Valerie hovered beside her modern glass house with a latte and a phone, barking instructions like she was directing a real estate commercial. Scott's crew planted markers deep into my yard. Tanya followed them, taking photos, measurements, and refusing to be intimidated. At one point, Valerie stepped in front of Tanya and snapped, "You can't photograph that. It's private survey data," Tanya calmly replied. "It's on his land, which means it's his data." Valerie stormed off like someone had unplugged her power supply. When the day wrapped up, Tanya pulled me aside. "They're setting up a narrative," she said. "They're trying to create confusion, document everything. I did. And it's a good thing because the next escalation wasn't from Valerie. It was from the HOA. Friday morning, every door on our street had a flyer tucked into the handle, "Protect our property. Values support Maple Ridge Estate's boundary realignment." Realign, a cute way of saying take land that isn't theirs. We weren't even part of the HOA zone. That wasn't a detail, they legally had no authority here. But someone was trying to change that. I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who. Things snowballed fast after that. Apparently enough, neighbors had complained, or enough rumors had reached the county that they sent their own team to settle the conflicting surveys. At 7 a.m., the following Tuesday, 2 county trucks pulled in. A zoning official, a recorder's office rep, a neutral survey crew with equipment that looked expensive enough to measure the distance between galaxies. Valerie came out dressed like she'd been waiting for this moment, tight blazer, tall heels, clipboard predatory smile. She greeted the officials like she owned them. "Thank you for coming," she said sweetly. "I just want this resolved quickly." She shot me a sideways look that said resolved in my favor. Tanya arrived a few minutes later, rolling a heavy case behind her and wearing that calm, smug expression that hinted she already knew the ending. We all walked the property line. Quiet, tense. Neighbor curtains twitched like stage props. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. And then one of the county surveyors, a bald guy with a notebook big enough to stop a bullet, paused, frowned, and called the others over. They murmured, pointed, cross-checked equipment. Tanya's eyebrows lifted. "Oh boy," she whispered. "Here we go." The zoning officer walked toward me. "Mr. Cole," he said, "we've identified a significant boundary violation." Valerie took a step forward, ready to celebrate. He continued, "Not on your side." She froze. "Miss Granger's structure extends approximately 12 feet onto your parcel. That includes her garage, part of her deck, and a portion of the back wall." Silence swallowed the street. Valerie sputtered something about her own survey, about Scott's findings, about clearly there's been a mistake. But this wasn't a mistake. It was the moment everything snapped into place. The flags, the drone, the flyers, the sudden HOA interest. She wasn't defending her property. She was covering up what she'd already built on mine. And this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the ugliest suburban war Pine Ridge Lane had ever seen. The county's findings should have ended everything, but Valerie Granger wasn't the type to surrender. If anything, the revelation that her house was sitting on my land only made her double down. 2 days after the survey results, a courier dropped off a thick envelope, heavy paper, embossed letterhead, the whole 9 yards. Inside was a lawsuit filed on behalf of Miss Valerie Granger to resolve boundary ambiguities and secure equitable easement rights. Translation: she wanted me to sell her the land she'd illegally built on. Monica stopped reading halfway through and muttered, "She's out of her mind." Then she poured herself a whiskey from my kitchen like it was part of the legal process. And then the HOA showed up. 3 people stood on my porch that evening, 2 polo-wearing enforcers and Brenda Whitaker, president of Maple Ridge Estates, an HOA with more rules than the U.S. tax code. Brenda smiled, like she was doing me a favor. "We're working toward integrating this street into our community zone," she said, handing me a glossy brochure. "Valerie has expressed concerns about inconsistent boundaries in the area." "Let me guess," I said. "You're helping fund her lawsuit." Brenda didn't blink. "We simply support residents who value order." "Order," I laughed. "She built on my land." Brenda's smile stayed frozen. Boundaries can be fluid. That was my moment. I knew right then this wasn't Valerie acting alone. This was coordinated, strategic, a land grab wearing a polite suburban face. The next morning, something slid under my front door, an unmarked brown envelope. Inside were printed email screenshots. Valerie, Brenda, someone named Board Legal Group. Lines highlighted in red. "If Granger establishes public confusion narrative, we can push for zoning overlay. Recommend painting Ethan Cole as uncooperative outsider. HOA Housing Improvement Fund can discreetly support legal cost." My hands shook reading it. I forwarded everything to Monica. Her reply came within minutes. Time to go nuclear. That night I created a Google Drive folder titled HOA Corruption Evidence Public. I uploaded every photo document, email drone, screenshot everything. Then I posted it anonymously on Reddit. HOA trying to steal my land by funding neighbor's fake boundary case. Here's proof. It exploded. Within 24 hours, it hit 10,000 upvotes. Then 20, then 50. Local journalists emailed. A property rights podcaster called my voicemail twice. Someone made a meme of Valerie standing in her driveway labeled, "When you try to steal land and lose the whole neighborhood instead." By the time our court date arrived, Valerie wasn't just a neighbor. She was an internet villain. The courtroom was packed. Reporters sat in the back. 3 neighbors showed up pretending they were just observing courtroom procedures. Valerie walked in wearing a navy suit tailored within an inch of its life, trying to look composed. But her lawyer looked like he'd aged 20 years preparing for this. Monica stood beside me, cool, calm, armed with binders like she was about to dismantle corporate fraud. She started simple. County survey results, historical plats, photos of Valerie's markers on my land, drone footage timestamps. Then she slid the email printouts across the judge's bench. Brenda Whitaker's name, the HOA's internal funding notes. The strategy to portray Ethan as difficult. The judge's eyebrows climbed so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. Valerie's lawyer objected, claiming the emails were anonymous and unreliable. Monica smiled slowly, dangerously. She revealed she'd subpoenaed the domain registrar, the sender's IP a Maple Ridge Estates HOA internal server. Then came Scott Delaney. He was called by the court itself thanks to the complaint filed with the licensing board. He tried to lie. He tried to dodge. He tried to play dumb. Until Monica put his signed survey on the projector next to the county's report showing the real boundary. Then she asked the question that broke him. "Mr. Delaney, did you alter or misrepresent the boundary location at Miss Granger's request?" He cracked like dropped glass. "She pressured me. Said the HOA would support it. I shouldn't have signed off. I didn't think anyone would challenge it." Gasps rippled through the court. Valerie's face went pale. Brenda quietly left the room. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His ruling was clear. My land was mine. Valerie's house encroached. Her claim was invalid. Her survey was fraudulent. The HOA's involvement would be referred for investigation. When we stepped outside, reporters swarmed. Valerie's lawyer fled. Valerie herself looked hollow, as if the world she curated so carefully had collapsed in one morning. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just breathed for the first time in months. Because the real fallout was still coming, and it would hit her harder than any ruling ever could. The judge's ruling should have been the end of it, but for Valerie, it was the beginning of a very public unraveling. 3 days after the hearing, her legal team filed a motion to withdraw from the case irreconcilable differences. Translation, she couldn't pay them, and they wanted nothing to do with the fallout. Her homeowner's insurance refused to cover the mess, citing material misrepresentation of property boundaries. Without coverage, the financial burden of rent, back pay, and demolition fell squarely on her shoulders. Pine Ridge Lane watched quietly as it all started to crack. Within a week, a for sale sign appeared in front of her house. The listing photos were bright and flattering, but the comments section wasn't. Zillow's neighborhood chatter had turned savage. Is this the encroachment house? Does the deck still hang over the neighbor's land? LOL. Imagine building on someone else's property. Prospective buyers came, toured, then left without making offers. One couple stepped out of a showing, took one look at Valerie standing stiffly in her driveway, and walked right back to their car. The clock ticked. The judge had given her 90 days to either pay rent for the portion of land she'd taken or remove the encroaching structure entirely. Valerie tried an appeal. It was denied. She filed a request for an extension. Also denied. Then, the inevitable happened. Early one Tuesday morning, I stepped onto my porch with a mug of coffee just in time to see 2 work trucks pull into her driveway. The contractors were polite, quiet, and painfully aware of the tension in the air. "We're here for the court-ordered removal," one said, nodding toward the garage. Valerie wasn't outside. Her curtains were closed. Her car was gone. Maybe that was better for her. Piece by piece, they unbolted the garage wall, then the support beams, then the deck. By midday, the entire corner of her house sagged awkwardly, like a secret finally exposed to daylight. It wasn't satisfying in a vengeful way, it was just reality catching up. Several neighbors drifted by pretending to walk dogs or check mail. A couple murmured things like, "Good for you for standing firm," or "Never liked the way she acted." One older gentleman patted my shoulder and said, "Bullies hate boundaries. Glad you held yours." Meanwhile, the HOA, those fearless warriors of lawn height, imploded. Turns out someone leaked their internal audit. The fund they'd been using to support community initiatives was partially redirected to Valerie's legal expenses. Brenda Whitaker, the HOA president, announced she was taking a temporary leave for health reasons, which everyone knew was code for getting out before the fire spreads. The board dissolved within the month. No more flyers. No more door-to-door visits. No more suburban intimidation campaigns. Just silence, the peaceful kind. A few weeks later, Valerie's house finally sold, but at a steep discount, according to the realtor I ran into at the grocery store. The buyers were a young couple, Jake and Mia Lawson, remote tech workers, who apologized before I even had a chance to speak. "We heard there was history," Mia said cautiously. "Handled," I replied. Jake grinned. "Good. We have zero interest in stealing your tomatoes." That broke the ice. We had beers on the fence line that evening, talking about everything except the past. They were grounded, funny, normal, the kind of neighbors you hope for but rarely get. So I decided to mark the moment. The next Saturday, I installed a custom-made brass sign on my brand-new cedar fence. It read, "Private property 0% encroachment since 2025. Jake nearly spit out his drink laughing. "This needs merch," he said. "Shirts, mugs, bumper stickers. Give it time," I told him. That afternoon, a few more neighbors wandered over. Someone dragged out a portable grill. Another brought coleslaw. Someone else made a tiny diorama of a fence with a toy bulldozer labeled HOA Memorial. Even Tanya showed up sunglasses on carrying a bottle of wine. "Told you we'd bury them," she said. The sun dipped behind the hill, the sky turning that soft purple you only get in Colorado evenings. Kids ran through the grass. Laughter floated over the yards. For the first time since moving in, the land felt truly mine. Not defended, not disputed, not threatened. Just mine. I walked the property line as the last of the daylight settled. The new markers glinted in the soil, fresh, permanent, unambiguous. No flags planted by someone else. No drone buzzing overhead. No neighbor with a clipboard waiting to pounce. Just quiet. And I realized something. Valerie's mistake wasn't bad math or a crooked survey. Her mistake was assuming intimidation worked on everyone. Her mistake was assuming a person wouldn't fight for what mattered, especially when that something was placed in their care by family. She tried to rewrite the boundaries on paper, but the real boundaries, the ones in the dirt, the ones that mattered, never moved, and neither did I.